And so this one comes in. This is an interesting one. It's a question based on a biblical objection that I've seen from certain people who hold to a specific theology. And so this comes in from Gavin Lockard, $5 soup chat. Appreciate the support. So he says, the Bible seems to say that the dead know nothing. I think he's pointing to Ecclesiastes, which describes everything under the sun, from my understanding. Nothing until Jesus comes back and resurrects humans. So if I could add a little context, I've seen some people argue for a position called soul sleep, Dr. Miller, where basically we don't go to heaven when we die. We sleep until the resurrection. And so a lot of people that hold to that specific theology, they are very skeptical of near-death experiences, I think, because of their presuppositions behind those ideas. And they'll look to arguments like this from Ecclesiastes. And so his question is this compatible with near-death experiences, Steve?
No, it's not compatible with those, because when you go to the other side and you're seeing a long deceased relative that's very much alive, and you're talking to that relative, that would not be consistent with soul sleep. And so I believe that the near-death experience, if you're just looking at it and believe nothing about the Bible, you would believe that, okay, people are conscious on the other side.
Right.
Now, that theology, I do believe that the passage he's referring to comes from Ecclesiastes. The passages they refer to, and they can sound quite persuasive if we just look at the passages that they use to try to confirm that doctrine. Jehovah's Witnesses believe this, for example. And in the Jehovah's Witness New World Translation, you'll see where Jesus is talking to the thief on the cross and says, "Today you will be with me in paradise." And they punctuate it to where it's saying, I tell you today, you will be with me in paradise. Okay, which makes it sound like that can be compatible with soul sleep, that he's not really going to see the thief on the cross today after they die, sometime in the future. But whatever the Jehovah's Witnesses do in their translation of the Bible, and I think it's recognized that translation is not really a good translation from the original Greek. They don't even mention who did the translation. I don't know if they've discovered who did it or if it's been made public. But when it comes to a niche Jehovah's Witness doctrine, when you see those scriptures, they're translated in very unusual ways that you would normally not see them. So back to Ecclesiastes, saying that the dead know nothing or can teach nothing or these type things. Ecclesiastes, the context of Ecclesiastes is talking about life under the sun. In other words, let's look at life, Solomon says, as if all there is here.
Right.
Well, then life is meaningless. So he makes a lot of statements that seem bizarre to us if you don't understand the context. You know, it's all meaningless. Why? Because no matter what we accomplish, no matter what Solomon did with all his wealth, it's just going to be gone. And Solomon loves teaching others his wisdom. When you're dead, you don't teach others your wisdom anymore here on earth. When you're deceased, there's so many things that you can't do. What is he talking about? On earth. Well, the dead know nothing on earth. And so the great scholars and the people who are completely foolish and never learned anything in life, it just evens the playing field. It doesn't matter anymore. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity, he says, if life is just under the sun. So he's not talking about the afterlife, what these people can experience. And I think when you compare this to very clear scriptures like Jesus' transfiguration. Now, if the dead are all in soul sleep, how is Jesus communicating with the long deceased Moses and Elijah? Well, that has to be an exception to the rule. I really believe the only translation that makes sense of the context and the grammar when Jesus is speaking to the thief on the cross is he's saying, every translation will say something of this nature, except the Jehovah's Witness translation. Today you'll be with me in paradise. Why would he say, I say to you today? Well, of course you're saying it today. When else would you be saying it except right now? You know, that's just not a phrase that's used. So it's so today you will be with me in paradise. He didn't say, well, today you're going to die at some future time when we have the future resurrection. I'll see you on the other side. He says, today you'll be with me in paradise. So I think it's very evident that in the Revelation, he has a vision. It's the souls of the martyrs are crying out to him. They seem to be very much alive on the other side. So, so I just disagree with that theology. And I do think it contradicts what we see in near-death experiences.
It does. And that's an excellent answer, Dr. Miller. I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. Why is $5 by his name? Is that a $5 question? Or
it is. And you gave more than a worthy response for the $5 question, Dr.
No,
Miller.
I'm not demeaning that question at all. I'd never seen that before on the thing, but no, that's a very good question. And there is a strain within Protestantism where that had become quite popular. So I have that doctrine became quite popular. And so I've talked to a lot of people in that regard. Excellent question. Thank you.
Isn't there now a challenge to those that hold to soul sleep to engage in a sophisticated and meaningful manner this evidence for near-death experiences? Because this evidence really does contradict, as you said, the doctrine of soul sleep. But you've explained a great amount of passages that they use, like those in Ecclesiastes. Am I correct to say, Dr. Miller, when Paul says that he's absent from the body, I say and willing rather to be absent from the body and to be present with the Lord, is that saying that when we die, our body goes into the ground, waits for the resurrection, glorification, and our spirit, our regenerated spirit, goes to heaven, goes to the third heaven to be with God?
That's the way I'm taking that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so the sleep, when they say, well, you know, the Bible talks about sleep, is that referring to our bodies sleeping until the first resurrection when we're glorified, the redemption of our bodies?
You know, I'd have to go back and look at all the passages that are talking about us sleeping, but I think that's just an analogy or a way of expressing death. When somebody dies and you go see them in their casket, they look like they're asleep. And so sometimes when they're speaking of death, they're speaking of them sleeping. They're not making a statement as to where their spirit is or what's going on. They're merely saying, okay, you know, he's asleep, meaning death.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it with Revelation 6. The souls under the altar, they don't sound like they're asleep. They sound like they're fully conscious. So I appreciate that, Steve.